disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. And hopefully I can continue saying that because C-11 passed, ladies and gentlemen. The controversial online streaming act that we covered on this channel and really highlighted the between-the-lines dystopian authority that this was creating, that the fact that this is more of a tyrannical overreach of internet and content creators, and how it was basically the government's being the arbiters of what Canadians can see and not see, and so on and so forth, passed. It officially passed with royal approval. So this is kind of the big, giant burst that is disappointing of a lot of content creators, including myself, because as a controversial content creator myself already, having to deal with the algorithms of YouTube and the corporate consolidation, going through those hurdles and then to have this hurdle on top of it is just absolutely atrocious. So here's what this all entails here, and we covered this before. So this is the Online Streaming Act, the Broadcast Act, whatever you like to call it, C-11, the new censorship bill, and they designed this so the Liberal government, along with the NDP and part of the Conservative Party, was also for this. Was basically they were concerned that people were watching online content that wasn't, Canadian approved. And they were trying to frame this as a way to promote Canadian content, which just kind of seemed ridiculous on the face of it, because we already have in place through the CRTC the CanCon rule, which is that broadcasters like radio and television had to dedicate certain hours a week, a certain amount of hours per week, to increase Canadian content. That's why if you ever listen to a Canadian radio station, they're required to play, certain hours of Nickelback and Rush and Celine Dion. That's the CanCon rule. Same with television. They have to show a certain amount of Canadian television programs per week. That was already in place. But now they're trying to expand this into the internet realms, and especially with a lot more people looking at to YouTube and looking at Netflix and Disney Plus. Now they want to have control over that. And that is where it gets very controversial, because it's not just Netflix and Disney Plus, it's also independent content creators like myself. And that's where this gets really, really controversial. So here it is here. This is the Parliament website to prove that it has officially passed with royal assent on April 27, 2023. And this is C-11, an act to amend the Broadcasting Act and make it related and consequential amendments to other acts, also known as the Online Streaming Act, officially has passed and made to law. But here's where this gets almost hilarious, is Bill C-11 passed, but we don't even know really what it is. At least that's what City News is saying about this. And you think that City News, being a large broadcaster, same with Global and CTV and the CBC, would be diving deep into this, because this is the new expansion of the Broadcast Act. This is part of the legislative of broadcast media and stuff like that. You would think they'd be up in arms with this, but they don't even know what it is. And they even said in the article here, the passing of Bill C-11 is the biggest piece of broadcast or media legislation this country has seen in decades. You would think you would have a clear picture of its implications. But despite receiving royal assent, that's where the Governor General gets approval, and that's, that takeaway, becoming law, not even leading experts in the field can say what the bill's many changes will look like in practice. So even the people that put this together, the framework of putting this legislation together, they don't even know what this bill will impose on Canadians. They just passed something, and the people that put this together don't even know what to do. That is just insane. That is insane that you can't even properly explain to other Canadians that you just imposed this law affecting their streaming services and taking control of the internet, and you can't even explain what it is or what's going to do to Canadian viewers. It's just, I can't believe it. Can't believe it. And then they also point to Michael Geist or Michael Guest. I don't know how you pronounce that. Geist, I guess. Is a law professor at the University of Ottawa and holds the Canadian Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce law. He says that this bill was with profound implications both for creators and consumers of basically any kind of digital media. So, the people that are framing this together don't even know what this bill imposes. And again, they try to spin this around as some sort of celebration of, diverse Canadians and trying to promote Canadian-based content, which again, we've already had that for decades. We've already had the CanCon law in effect. This just seemed more of an overreach of the government, especially right after dealing with the trucker convoy and the mandate protests and the disinformation, the misinformation, how Justin Trudeau just recently at the University of Ottawa was still talking about disinformation. How that seems to roll out and the timing of all this, it just seems like another piece of government censorship being placed upon Canadians, posing itself as promoting content creators. But who are the arbiters to decide who is content creator friendly for Canadians and who should get promoted most is decided by the government, and that's just, again, posing just more censorship. So, the National Citizens Inquiry looked into this, and this is a nonprofit that does these breakdowns. They do these hearings, and they cultivize different people to speak out against things. They did an inquiry on the restrictions and the mandates of COVID, and now they're doing an inquiry on C-11 here. And it says, Bill C-11 is a travesty to any free nation. While the government speaks of protecting Canadian culture, it also states that Canada is a post-national country with no culture. The speed of which this bill has not gone through Parliament and Senate since being sent back from the Senate can be understood as nothing except an attack on movements like NCI, which exposes the corruption and misdeeds of officials. The NCI has, as it draws up worldwide experts and individual Canadians, is presenting facts and evidence the government has tried to cover up for months. The work of the NCI has only begun that regulations like those that arise from Bill C-11 will stifle debates and facts from getting out. It will stop the free expression of Canadians. Senators voted 52 to 16. 52 to 16. Royal assent was granted at 6:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. New regulations arised out of this bill would be punished in the Gazette. So we encourage Canadians to read and comment on the Gazette and stand up again for freedom. The NCI is currently being censored and shadow banned in social media, and instead of increasing censorship like the World Economic Forum proposed at its recent meetings in Davos, Canadians need to see regulations stopping censorship in the media, including social media. And that is why this is a bigger deal than most people realize. But again, they're not barely even mentioning it, and even big broadcasters and big time publishers like City News, like the Globe and Mail, like even the National Post, they don't even have a clue on what this bill is proposing because it's just so deeply vague. It is so unbelievably vague that it's complete nonsense. And what this is imposing is just a affront saying that we're going to try and promote Canadian content, but we're also going to be the arbiters to decide what Canadian content can be promoted. What is our vision of Canadian culture? What is our vision? Mean the tyrannical elitists and the World Economic Forum puppets. What is our vision of Canadian culture? Because I always thought to believe that we were very multicultural and we didn't really have a substantial Canadian culture. You know, we like hockey. We have poutine. We drink Molson beer. We listen to Rush. We lost Gordon Lightfoot recently. Folk singer from Canada here. Very predominant name. Wayne Gretzky. Like, I thought that was part of the Canadian culture, but I guess now they're going to have control with this new law intact here. And I want to show you also again. So there's this guy here, JJ McCullough, very famous Canadian, very famous YouTuber here in Canada. He does a lot of, history content, and he dives deep into certain bills and whatnot. He has a interesting show, and he appeared on this podcast with Czech News in Victoria, and he is going to explain what C-11 is. A YouTuber is going to explain what this is going to implement, because again, it's hurting the YouTube community more than it's hurting private broadcasters, because private broadcasters, they're already aligned with corporations, and corporations are already aligned with the government. So they're in the safe. But for someone like me, for someone like him, or for any other content creator here in Canada, we're the ones in trouble because we don't have a lobby group. We don't have that safety net. We're out here in the wild west of the internet, and now we're being overturned and taken hostile by the Canadian government. So listen to what he has to say.
Basically, what the bill aims to do is expand the jurisdiction of the CRTC, which currently has authority over radio and television in Canada, to include basically the internet and basically any sort of broadcasting platform that exists on the internet. That both includes sort of what we would think of as the more sort of corporate streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus, as well as the more sort of user-generated platforms like YouTube, which I produce content for. Right? So it's basically in the same sort of way that we think of the CRTC having authority over what kind of content is released on the television and radio airwaves, in what sort of quantity, not only in terms of sort of like, the regulations of like getting your broadcasting license and that sort of thing, but more in terms of like what kind of content are you promoting. We know that the CRTC requires television stations in this country to air a certain quantity of Canadian content, Canadian CanCon, as we say, same with on the radio. And that is really sort of the sticking point that I think has people like me the most kind of up in arms, is this idea that the CRTC is now going to be in the business of dictating what is the Canadian content quotas that YouTube itself has to meet, and then also coming up with some sort of definition of what is Canadian enough to be promoted through some sort of revised algorithm.
So are we talking about...
So that's the big inquiry. That's the big question. That's the question I'm having, because I'm a Canadian. I'm making Canadian content for Canadians, watched by Canadians, and yet I'm a controversial figure because I'm being critical of the Canadian government. I'm being critical of the American government. I'm being critical of the establishment. I'm being critical of the globalist agenda. Yet I'm a Canadian promoting, content for Canadian viewers. So where exactly does this line, where exactly is the parameters of what is Canadian content? That's the thing that they don't even say in this bill. And that's why this is so dangerous, is they made it so vague that they can't even make a decision on what Canadian content is viable according to them. So they can just decide that even if you're a Canadian making Canadian content, you're not good enough to be Canadian content. Because you're not promoting Canada. You're not promoting the Canadian culture. You're not promoting promoting the tyrannicalness of Justin Trudeau. You're not promoting the loveliness and corruption of cities. You're not promoting the corruption of Doug Ford. That's why this bill is so controversial for someone like me. But of course, other broadcasters that are already in line with big corporations, they're fine. They're fine. They have their own safety net. They're living the dream. They couldn't care less about Bill C-11. That's why City News published that article saying, we don't even know what it is. We don't know what it is. the legislators don't know what this is because they're not in trouble. But for someone like me, it's definitely deeply concerning.
Censorship, or are we talking about the discoverability of content like yours, or the discoverability of content on Netflix? So it'll change the way your Explore page looks like on a lot of these sites.
Yeah, it's more the latter from what I understand. There are different bills that are also in the pipeline that would regulate different aspects of the internet.
Right.
But this one is much more, I would say, sort of focused on the kind of the more entertainment sort of side of the internet. So it is... and the bill uses this term quite explicitly, regulating discoverability. So the goal is to make it easier for people, ordinary users, to quote unquote discover Canadian content, whatever that means. But that has a lot of sort of professional YouTubers like myself and other content creators on TikTok and elsewhere kind of up in arms because, we don't really... We've spent a lot of time trying to master the platform as it already exists.
Right, because it has its own algorithms in terms of what it shows you.
And then, people kind of give themselves headaches trying to master that system, right? Like it's never super clear, what makes any given video, go high or low or be easy to discover or, be popular or unpopular. I mean, a lot of this is very ambiguous. The algorithm is kind of, this kind of temperamental god that no one quite really knows how to appease.
And so it sounds like the Canadian government wants to add another layer on top of the algorithms that these sites have.
Yes, precisely. That's exactly right.
So, in a nutshell, just to put this in layman's terms, basically this is another algorithm. This is basically another algorithm that they're going to slap on to YouTube and TikTok and all that stuff. Considering that us content creators already have struggles as is to promote ourselves and get on discoverability. Like, I know that for myself, I'm not getting as much discoverability as, say, CNN or MSNBC because of conglomerate of the corporations and how they bought into the YouTube algorithm. That's already a struggle as is, but now the Canadian government is putting basically their own algorithm in, saying that not only am I going to have to jump hurdles to get above CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and ABC and all these other corporate conglomerates, I'm also going to have to jump over the hurdles of what the Canadian government is trying to promote and what they want Canadians to view and witness. So that is why this is such a big deal, ladies and gentlemen. And this law, it came to pass. Not a lot mentioned, not a lot of debate or decorum or even mention about this. Like, you're hearing this on a podcast by a YouTuber. And why? Because a YouTuber would be concerned about this. Because it personally affects someone like JJ McCullough. It would personally affect someone like me who does content creation. But for someone that's at CBC or Global or CTV or City News or any of those other major platforms, they're already in the bank because they work for a giant corporation. They don't have to worry about this. But for an independent content creator that is trying to fight the hurdles already in a corporate consolidated world, this is just adding another ridiculous hurdle, and this is going to actually hurt more content creators from Canada that it's going to promote. And that's why people need to stand up, and that's why people need to be outraged about something like this. This is a censorship bill. This is not promoting Canadian content, because if you really did promote Canadian content, you would not have a bill like this. You would just be continuing on the CanCon bill, which is already in place. It's already promoting Canadian content, and you would be listening to more people like JJ McCullough and not slamming him down by saying he's a radical or he's on YouTube, so I couldn't care less about him. That is why this is such a big deal, folks, and I'm not just saying this as a content creator. I'm saying this as a person who strongly believes in the principle of free speech, that everyone deserves that equal right. Everyone deserves it no matter what. We need to defend freedom of speech, even if it's speech you disagree with. That's the biggest thing, is that you disagree with that speech. You should be fighting it more, that person has the right to speak out, because that is the purpose of freedom of speech. If everyone likes the same speech, there's no reason to have a law for it. But it's the speech that is controversial the things that are against your own opinions that you need to fight for, because why is my speech more protected than his or somebody else's? That's what we need, is a principled stance on this. And as a principled person, I would say that C-11 is just downright disgraceful, and it's going to hurt Canadian culture. It's going to hurt more content creators, and it's going to be even worse for people in the long run than promoting Canadian content. That's what a principled stance and a principled argument I would say about this.